Jersey Joe from Pucks and Pitchforks and DraftPro Hockey joined me on today's episode. We talked about the upcoming draft and some prospects that Jersey Joe has in mind. There's also some rumblings happening within the Devils organization. There's a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils alongside Jersey Joe. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Jersey Joe, my colleague over at Pucks and Pitchforks and DraftPro Hockey, accompanied me on today's episode. We talked about the NHL Draft, what should the Devils do with their 10th overall pick, and some potential prospects that Jersey Joe has his eyes on. When you're listening to this episode, I might be making my way to Vegas to cover the NHL Draft. I want to thank you guys in advance for all your support because it doesn't happen without your guys' viewership on YouTube and your listenership on podcast streaming services. There's some rumors surrounding the Devils organization that they might sign Brett Pesce to a contract come July 1st once free agency hits. It's going to be a crazy next few days because Jersey Joe and I recorded this episode shortly before puck drop for Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. I will share my thoughts on the battle between the Oilers and Panthers in the next episode. But for the time being, we're going to focus on the draft. We're going to talk about Pesce and what he could potentially bring to the roster. And we're also going to hear Jersey Joe's thoughts as to how the Devils have been approaching the offseason so far. Right now, I think they're making steps in the right direction. But without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Jersey Joe. Take it away. Jersey Joe, how you doing?
Doing great, man. It's kind of windy today. You know, we talk about rumblings. You know, it's Game 7 evening with the Oilers and a couple former Devils that are playing in tonight's game. So segue over, where did Adam Henry come from years ago? The Windsor Spitfires. So I will say this. The Devils are in a really unique situation when it comes to the 10th overall selection. What are we going to do after 2 years ago? When I was in Asbury Park, I told you month in advance, shame on the Mets for second overall. But this year, I don't have a clear-cut answer because it's tightly contested.
Yeah, so it was rumored that the Devils would trade away their 10th overall pick. For right now, they still hold on to that. That could change within the next few days. We'll see what happens. Let me hear your thoughts on Brett Pesce so far.
Brett Pesce is the kind of veteran you want to have for a guy like, let's say, Luke Hughes, to be on that right side of him. And having him being an older veteran, he knows what to expect out of the Rangers, the Flyers, the Islanders, everyone in the same division. He doesn't need to be introduced all that much. He just has to get reacclimated to Sheldon Keefe's system. And when I talk about Sheldon Keefe's system, I'm talking about not necessarily just fast, but also attacks and is supportive, but also is complementary to star players and role players.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've always talked about is just adding more Sasquatch to this roster. And Pesce, he stands 6'3". He weighs about 200 pounds. And while with the Hurricanes, we know he's not afraid to throw around his weight. And I think that's the big thing that the Devils need. And not only that, more depth is essential on the blue line, especially now that Kevin Ball, your guy, unfortunately, is now heading to Calgary. Wait, let me get your thoughts on that first. Like, tell me about Kevin Ball, and then we'll talk about Pesce.
So when I first remember him getting through the trade, he was a big, angry Sasquatch back with the Ottawa 67s. He was throwing hits with his rear end on guys who were smaller than him. He was being a big-time enforcer. But as he got to the NHL level, he started to kind of like simmer that down. But I think the way that when he gets to Calgary, he's a Western Canadian boy by heart. And he's going to definitely have to unleash that when he goes to the Flames. Because in New Jersey, the coaching staff simmered him down too much for my liking. And if the Devils can get something like that out of Pesce, where they can let him throw his weight around with their defensive coach, Ryan McGill, who came a few years ago from Las Vegas. So if they can allow defensemen to be more assertive and aggressive, it will help this Devils defense allow less goals allowed.
Yeah, so I think for Kevin Ball, he of everyone on the roster, similar to Alexander Holtz, he's the odd man out because John Marino, Jonas Siegenthaler, they have modified no trade clauses. Dougie Hamilton, he's not going anywhere. Luke Hughes and Nemeth, they're still on their entry-level contracts. And they just signed, shortly before we start recording this episode, Nick DeSimone to a one-year deal, one way. So that adds more depth. And Pesce, he'll be interesting. Once again, it's widely rumored that he will sign with the Devils. Widely rumored. It's not confirmed. But July 1st will
not
be
yet. It's not July 1st.
Yeah. July 1st will be here before we know it. But Pesce, I would love to add him to the roster. I'll do a full-fledged episode on it in the near future while I'm in Vegas. But Pesce, right-handed defenseman, 200 pounds, won't rack up that many points. But the thing is, the Devils need to replace the productivity of Damon Severson and Ryan Graves. Two guys who didn't really see themselves in the score sheet all that often. As we all know, Damon Severson, he used to be an offensive-minded defenseman, but in his last year with the Devils, he kind of took a step back for the sake of the team, became a bottom four defenseman, and the advanced analytics showed that he improved defensively for the sake of the team. And people started to realize that even though Damon Severson at times would make mistakes, he knew how to rebound and he knew how to improve on his game, just based on my perspective. And now he's with the Blue Jackets with a much bigger role. That was bound to happen. And for someone like Ryan Graves, I think there's rumors swirling from James Nichols saying that the Penguins and Ryan Graves might be looking for a buyout option because it hasn't really panned out too well in Pittsburgh, but we knew that Ryan Graves was going to get paid. And now Kevin Ball is off the roster. Depth is essential for this Devils team. And I think Pesce will definitely be an interesting add if and when they do sign him.
I will say this, the Devils needed a really reliable veteran right-handed defenseman besides Dougie Hamilton. And Dougie Hamilton is more offensive-based. And there's a kid in the NHL draft that reminds me a lot of him in Carter Yakemchuk. The way he plays is more so really good with stick handling, graceful skater for the most part, but needs to work on the edge work. But that bomb of a shot, the snapshot that he has from the blue line is definitely going to help if the Devils add him at the 10th overall selection. I wouldn't be surprised if the Devils went with him or Zane Paret because they have really elite vision and they're not really meant to be defensive defensemen, but you do have to acquire other pieces to be defensive-minded players. And you can do that on the second day of the draft, and you can do that in free agency.
Before we continue with today's episode, I want to tell you guys about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds, please remember to gamble responsibly. And I can't wait to head to Vegas, which is the mecca of gambling here in America. But please remember to always gamble responsibly. I can't reiterate that enough. All right, let's get back to our discussion with Jersey Joe. Take it away once again. All right, you just spoke on it. The NHL Draft. We're just a few days away from it. I'm looking forward to it. It's taking place in the Sphere, and you're my draft expert. Let's look at day one of the draft for Devils. They have the 10th overall pick. Who do you think they're going to select? And before you answer that question, I just have to ask you, I've been seeing a lot of people conflicted. Is this draft class deep? Because we already know who's going to go first overall. Celebrini's going to the Sharks. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. But after that, it seems like people are a little up in the air, conflicted. Oh, it's a deep draft class. Oh, no, it's not really that deep. What are your thoughts, and who do you think the Devils should select at 10th overall?
At 10th overall, Devils need a winger or center. At wing, there are a couple of guys I like. Brett Seneca from the CHL, a playmaker, physical guy. He can definitely turn into a goal scorer. Look at what Seth Jarvis was in his draft year. Took him out of his draft year, and he became a guy that the Carolina Hurricanes had right out of camp. Definitely turned some heads. I wouldn't be surprised if Brett Seneca was the guy. He has a similar frame to Connor Bedard, but he's not a Bedard, but he is a very good finisher, playmaker, and I can see him being a goal scorer. However, if the Devils want to go with physicality, they want someone who is good on and off the puck, but needs to improve a little bit on the skating and the edge work. Then you have a guy from Norway in Michael Brensik Nygaard, the Norseman. He was very assertive in the international play of the U18s in Finland, and he certainly turned a lot of heads. I would be very happy to get him because the way the Devils need that Sam Bennett style Sasquatch player, they need to stand up some players in the neutral zone along the boards to be like, Timo Meier can't do this all the time. You need to have someone else doing the dirty work for the Devils. And that guy definitely is a Michael Brensik Nygaard player. Now, if you want goal scoring, we're going to go back to the USN TDP with Cole Iserman. No relation to Stevie.
He's my favorite player, actually. I don't know how people feel about him, but he's actually, if he does fall to number 10, I really hope the Devils select him.
I will say this. I've been watching him all the time when I first started with Draft Prospects Hockey last summer. One of the first things I noticed, I don't care he has to be elite level skating. His skating is good to be on, let's say, a third, second line for the time being. And if he improves it a little bit, he could be a first, second line winger. And that sniping shot, that snapshot, that slap shot screams and yells Austin Matthews to me.
Well, it's actually funny you mentioned Austin Matthews. Here's a fun fact for you. I'm sure you already knew this, but while he was playing for Shattuck St. Mary's, which is considered the Harvard of hockey, and I actually spoke to Artem Schlain, who played with the same high school. That's how he describes it. Only two players, Sidney Crosby and Jonathan Taves, recorded more goals for Shattuck's under-18 team at 15 years old. Because Iserman scored 97 goals and 57 assists for 154 points in 50 games during the 2020-2021 season. That's incredible.
Right. I will say this. The more I watched Iserman, the more I loved watching that shot. And I think to myself going, man, oh man, this kid would fit like a glove on the Devils. He would absolutely fit on the left flank. And if he could also play in the right wing and just, stick to goal scoring and be like our poor man Stefan Richer, but even better, this would be huge for a guy like Sheldon Keefe, who already knows what an Austin Matthews looks like, but also knows what a Cole Eiserman can bring because he knows what Tom Fitzgerald knows from the USNTDP and the NCAA.
So let me
Now,
ask you.
no matter everyone, but I'm telling you, the way that the wind blows with the Devils, that Tom Fitzgerald knows that not Connolly, but you have Eiserman is also going to be you. Could he forgo that? I could see it, but Jay Pandolfo's being one hell of a good coach with Celebrity. So when you have a former Devils player now as a head coach for BU, this helps grow someone like an Eiserman for the New Jersey Devils if they do select him.
And Jay Pandolfo, I think a lot of people remember him on some of those Stanley Cup teams for the Devils in 2000 and 2003. And now he's doing big things with BU as their head coach. Happy to see Pandolfo really succeed at the collegiate scale. And it's funny, I was seeing some of the Devils discourse saying maybe Pandolfo could become the next head coach for the Devils. And I said, there's no chance of that happening. Just no, I wasn't feeling that. I think that's too big of a risk. He does have some track history with the Devils, a respectable track history, but try to get an already established NHL coach and don't take a risk on Pandolfo. Now, if you are rebuilding, that's different. But the Devils are trying to get back to the playoffs and make it to the second round because everything after that is gravy.
I do like gravy on my fries and my cheese curds if you're referring to poutine, but that would be for another day when we celebrate.
I hate this. Is going to be controversial. I'm not going to be too well liked to Canada, but I hate poutine. I absolutely hate it. It's like
I love it.
It's like a heart attack on a plate. I can't eat it. I can't eat it. I tried it one time. Not for me. I don't like poutine. Ugh. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to anyone in Canada. I just have a different taste. I just have different taste buds. All right. Don't me here. But anyway, let's move on before I get canceled in Canada again.
You're not.
Again, yeah. Let's talk about something else before I get canceled in Canada again. Now, who's an underrated player that you think the Devils can select with their 10th overall pick, or maybe not even their 10th overall, sometime a little later in the draft?
A little later in the draft, you're talking about second round through 7?
Yeah, well, they don't have a second round pick, but they have 2 third-round picks and they have a 6th-round pick. I think they have a 5th-round pick. Like, who do you think the Devils could select a little later in the draft that might be very underrated?
Very underrated. Well, there's a defenseman I like that's right-handed. It's supposed to go 40th. It's supposed to go through 70. I really love this right-handed defenseman named Adam Kleber. He's from the Lincoln Stars, and he is absolutely screams Sasquatch. Like 6'5", 212, 225 pounds. And this kid's going to, I think, University of Minnesota Duluth or something like that. I have to double check him, but Kleber. He basically was on the same team as Chase Cheslock, who the Devils drafted last year and who I wanted. And he does a really good Colin Miller, Charlie McAvoy hybrid game. But he does get a little aggressive out of position, but he's going to be one hell of a player. He eats up a lot of minutes, like 22 minutes on average a game. I will say, if you don't get him, at least look into someone like Mikhail Yegorov from the United States Hockey League, played with the Omaha Lancers. Really good goalie, one of the best goalies in the draft. And he's got far much better rebound control of all the goalies that I've watched. And yes, he is a Russian citizen, but he's already been playing in the U.S., so he has to probably have a work visa. And from what I spoke with Jim Berger is that with players that have work visas that happen to be from Russia, don't worry about passport bans. So I wouldn't be worried because he's also going to a NCAA D1 school.
Okay.
So look for him. There's another kid I like as a goalie named Evan Gardner. In his age 17 season, he's put up better numbers than Stuart Skinner did at that same time in his draft year. And he has a couple of shutouts. About 6'2", very flexible. He's really good to just do a really good job in net. And to me, he's one of the more underrated players with Saskatoon with the Blades. And I really think the Devils, if they're looking for goalies, they definitely should get him. Now, if you're looking for a power forward right wing from a team like the Madison Capitals, I am all for Austin Bernovic. Big guy, 6'4", 200 plus pounds. Really good shot. Reminds me similar to Nolan Foote, but even bigger and stronger and bulkier. He just has to work more on his footwork. And he played on a really deep Madison Capitals team who went into the first couple rounds of the playoffs.
All right, so I have one of your articles actually pulled up, and I love my Michigan Wolverines. Go Blue. At 139th overall for the Devils, you have Gabriel Eliasson. Tell me more about Eliasson and what he could potentially bring to the Devils roster, because this is an article that you wrote basically conducting rounds 4 through 7.
So he's a big guy. He likes to hit, but can also drive offensive play. And he's not afraid of playing in big games. He's very calm under pressure. And he's definitely going into the United States Hockey League. He's not ready just yet to go to like an NCAA team just yet, but he's definitely going to get accustomed to North America and then go to University of Michigan later, the following season or seasons, depending on his age and his build. And he's just going to build out that frame. And anytime like a European comes over to a USHL, OHL league, it helps them get accustomed to North American hockey on a more narrower surface.
Okay, so Eliasson is committed to play at the University of Michigan, right?
That's correct. That's why I put that there.
I would do the Michigan fight song, but I don't want to get flagged for copyright. Anyway, are there any other prospects that fans should keep an eye out for? And then I'm going to ask you a big question momentarily.
So another guy that I like in the draft, his name is James Mackey, left-handed defenseman. He may not get drafted, but he's definitely a big boy, skates well for a big left-handed defenseman. Then another kid is from New Jersey, up in the top 100s, named John Whipple from Morristown, New Jersey. He plays for the USN TDP team. He reminds me a bit of Paul Martin and a little bit of John Moore, and definitely need a player like him. But there's also a kid from Belarus that plays in the KHL named Pavel Moisevich, 6'4", about 190 pounds, 185 give or take. But he already has like a shutout or two this past season after coming up from either the VHL or the MHL. And he's been pretty solid besides fellow KHL rookie and Ilya Nabokov.
Awesome. All right. Before we continue even more, let me tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's close out our discussion with Jersey Joe. Take it away once again. Big question I got for you. I saved the best for last. Should the Devils trade away that 10th overall pick? They have a few days to do so. If so, who might they get? If not, why not?
If they do trade it away, it's for Rucker McGroarty, but I say no because you should trade Alexander Holtz for Rucker McGroarty. You swap two players that aren't fitting in with their organizations, and you'd be saying, okay, Alexander, we want a bigger physical guy who can bring something to our team now, but you can go out and play your thing out in Winnipeg. So good luck to you.
So you're saying, like, unless it's involved in that sort of trade package, hold on to it. But even then, you prefer Alexander Holtz.
I prefer moving Alexander Holtz for Rucker McGroarty at this time. I just think you come all this far. Why not just use it? I mean, you could have traded a lot sooner.
I respect that, and it's definitely going to raise some eyebrows, and it's going to be an interesting few days. I can feel it for the Devils organization.
I will say this: like you already conditionally traded away next year's pick, and I said next year in 2025 is going to be even deeper draft.
Well, here's the thing.
The Devils are focused on winning now.
Yes,
and they needed to get a goalie, so you might as well keep 2024.
That makes sense, and I did say that. I do understand, and I said this. Look, this is going to go one or two ways for Devils in next year's draft when it comes to the first round pick. If they're absolutely awful once again, then they can sort of tank to get that pick back if it lands in the top 10. But if they are competitive once again, they're not going to care about the draft. Remember,
right?
I other than you, has anyone really talked about Lenny Haminaho? He was the first player selected in last year's draft for the Devils. They didn't have a first-round pick. But no one's really talked about Lenny Haminaho or an update as to how he's doing, how he could fit in. I haven't even heard anyone bring his name up in trade discussions, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So it goes to show you that despite Haminaho being relatable to Tyler Toffoli, is that the comparison you made? Okay, that's
what I said last year, and I'm standing by it.
Okay, despite him being similar and playing a similar game as to Tyler Toffoli, no one's really talking about it. No one's really hyping him up. In fact, I hear more people talk about Seamus Casey, than Lenny Haminaho.
It's kind of funny how things shifted within a year. But a lot of people with the other Devils podcasts, I don't need to name a few, but you know a few, who switched their gears to a different setting. So their mindset's towards another thing. But me, being the draft guy, it's my job to keep tabs. But when I'm writing about these guys over at Pucks and Pitchforks, cheap little cheap plug there, I'm going to do an update on what the Devils do select. I'm going to judge it, and then I'm going to do what I could do later and see what happens with day 2 of the draft. And I'm going to judge those final picks and what the Devils do. So there's that. But the Devils got to have a few cheap contracts when they hit. And another guy I forgot to bring up is Miroslav Shatan Jr. He's a guy who is a center for Slovakia. He plays in the Slovak junior league, I think tier 1 or 2. But he's an average face-off winner, very good power forward, big boy, just like his father. He may not pan out like his dad, but he's certainly, if he does average out to be a good center, he would also be a wonderful power winger. And he's a left-handed shot, and he has a long reach, but I would not be surprised if he becomes a goal scorer in the late rounds.
It'll be interesting to see how things shake up Jersey Joe, we've talked about pretty much everything. We talked about silly season. We talked about potential trade outcomes for Devils. We talked about the draft, more importantly. Is there any final thoughts you want to share?
Final thoughts are, for those of you who are watching the draft or not watching the draft, you can follow me on Locked On Devils here and there, Pucks and Pitchforks, and you can read my stuff over on Draft Prospects Hockey. I have the Latvia and the Slovakia tournament standouts right there. And don't be surprised if any of them this year and next year are mentioned in the upcoming draft. And Adam Nemetz is the brother of Shimon Nemetz, and he will be a draft eligible next year.
All right. We'll see if the Devils land Brett Pesci. We'll see if that happens. We'll see who they select 10th overall. Fingers crossed it's Cole Yzerman. That's who I have my eyes set on. And I will see all of you in Vegas within the next few days. Looking forward to it. Jersey Joe, the pleasure is always mine.
Hey, my pleasure is always yours to enjoy. And when you're in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, unless it's on video.
Well, we're going to have some video content within the next few days. And like I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.